Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is another Friday Ramblings, because it's Friday, and I ramble. I'm your host, David the Bardic one, and we're going to have a little bit of fun right now, inspired by something we did a few episodes back. So, we did a big bad breakdown on Atari. Specifically how the name Atari has been used by different companies and different divisions, thanks to buyouts and mergers and subsidiaries. It's just not a simple question to ask, who is Atari? Now, fortunately, this will be a little less convoluted, but it is going to be just a little bit of fun. Because when we were talking about Atari, we mentioned one thing that was calling itself Atari for a while was purchased by a company called WMS Industries, which was formed from the merger of Williams Manufacturing and Midway. So a company that it was already formed from the merger of two merged with another one and eventually sold off those assets so that Atari could live again. But here's the real fun. WMS didn't keep the Midway assets. And what happened to Midway, and whether it does still exist, that's the story we're going to nail tonight. Because it's all thematic. The crazy, convoluted, in and outs, back and forth, tied together, broken apart, craziness that seems to define video game studios. I mean, the deeper you get into this, the more it just all blends together. It's like having a blender that also then has a reverse mode where it can spit out specific ingredients. That's the video game industry. Studios buy each other out, they merge, they buy the IP for stuff, they rename studios, those studios then do other stuff. It's just mind explosive. Which is why we got to chart all this stuff down, one step at a time, one video at a time. We are going to make sense of it all eventually. So, let's start with the Bad Mamma Jammas of Midway. Midway Games, Inc. was originally Midway Manufacturing and was founded in 1958 as an amusement game manufacturer, hence the name of their company. Now, for those of you who are a little bit young, may not really know about, amusement games. This is your stuff that's more like your skee ball, your crane games, where you take little so sorry for you. Those little basketball hoop games where you shoot the hoops, and if you get enough, the tickets come out, and you exchange the tickets for prizes. That kind of stuff, that's amusement games. Just basically anything that you would play in an arcade or on like the old boardwalks and in the carnivals that is not a video game can be called an amusement game. And this is where the term Midway Manufacturing comes from, because the Midway would be part of like the carnivals and the boardwalks, any place where you would get a lot of live entertainment like this. So, since that's who was buying all their products, that's what they called the company. See, already you're getting extra history here. So anyway, Midway Manufacturing was founded in 1958. They made some money. But in 1973, it decided to move into the interactive entertainment industry, aka the video game industry, developing and publishing arcade video games, because that's where all the money was in the 70s, was in the coin-op arcade games. Consoles hadn't really taken off big yet. There were some of them, but it was still a very new, risky market. So a lot of people were still starting with the arcade games. Because, hey, if somebody else makes a really good home console, we can always port our games to that, which is what happened a lot in the 70s and 80s. Well, the company scored its first mainstream hit with the US distribution of a little something you might have heard of called Space Invaders in 1978. So yeah, they spent like 5 years, plugging along until they got their first must-play hit. But that's business for you. Here's where things get fun. 10 years later, in 1988, we get the creation of the aforementioned WMS Industries, which was, of course, as I just said, an evolution of the Williams Manufacturing Company, which itself eventually became Williams Electronics Inc., and did a lot of their own games, including Defender and Robotron 2084, along with several other things. So, good times. But, as we said, in 1988, they changed their name to WMS Industries, and shortly thereafter bought Midway. So you had your nice little merged company. But it's not over yet, because 10 years later, in 1998, WMS spun off its remaining shares of Midway, and thus Midway kind of was reborn. Midway was ranked the 4th largest selling video game publisher in 2000, which is pretty good, because there were a lot of people publishing video games by 2000. Now, after 2000, Midway continued to develop and publish video games for the home and handheld video game market, but it started experiencing a loss of profit, and they had to get to some desperate tactics. So, a gentleman by the name of Sumner Redstone, who had formerly been head of the recently merged Viacom and CBS Corporation. Yeah, there's all those mergers again. TV, a little bit different, TV movie, but still, something about the entertainment industry. They just love to just all over the place. So, he had initially invested in 1998, holding approximately 15% of stock. However, by the end of 2007, he now owned 87%, which made him the de facto owner, because he owned more percentage of the company than anybody else. In December 2008, though, Redstone sold all his stock and $70 million of Midway debt to Mark Thomas, a private investor, for $100,000. Now, I know what you're saying. Why would you sell debt? Why would anybody want to buy debt? Now, I can't super get into that, because that does get into very detailed nature of the corporate world. But the basics of it is that by selling the debt, Sumner Redstone was able to walk away from the company with, just 100% in the clear. He sold the debt in Midway along with the shareholders, or not the shareholders, but the shares of the stock that he was holding, as he was a shareholder, so that he could walk away from the company 100%. Nobody would be coming after him later saying, look, you know, we had this debt while you were in charge. You're kind of responsible for helping us pay this off. No. I sold the essentially responsibility for that debt to this other guy. Go talk to him. So, you know, we still didn't. Oh, you are just stubborn, aren't you? Look at any. What the f is that? Where are you? You know what? We're just going to ignore the hair. It really wants to be there. Guest star. Lock of hair. Lock of hair, guest star. There you are. Gotcha now. Bye-bye, guest star. Told you before in that previous video, it can be a little distracting, but better than having no hair at all. All apologies to my people who are already bald, but it's just not my personal look. So, Sumner Redstone steps away, and our buddy Mark Thomas steps in. Unfortunately, things did not necessarily improve under Mark Thomas, and in February 2009, Midway Games filed for bankruptcy. Should be the end of the story, right? Not quite. Our old buddies Warner Brothers. And you want to talk about a company that has merged and purchased and owned and split off and restructured. I mean, you could pretty much write a multi-hundreds page book just on Warner Brothers. And Time Warner and AOL Time Warner and just... We're not even going to touch that one. That is... Woo! But that's one of the many things they did. They purchased the majority of Midway's assets, settled with Mark Thomas to relinquish his Midway stock and debt, a little bit of lawsuit fun. Basically, some of the people at Midway accused the executive officers of Midway that they misled shareholders into the value of the stock and how well the company was doing. Well, they themselves were selling their own stock, which is actually illegal. At least in a civil lawsuit level. I'm not sure about criminal because that's corporate law. That's very deep. But yeah, if you're running a company that has public investors and shareholders, and you tell them, oh yeah, no, the company's doing great, you should invest more money in the company. Meanwhile, you're selling your shares of the company behind their back so you can shortly thereafter run away scot-free with money that you really shouldn't have because you should be using it to pay off the company's debts. Yeah, that's a big no-no. But that lawsuit was dismissed. Blue. So all's well and good. This is the kind of thing that tends to come up a lot when companies file for bankruptcy, when they do have public stock being bought and sold. Is people are kind of upset that, hey, this company I invested in, I'm going to lose my money on this investment. They like to try to claim foul and break even. It's neither here nor there. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not. It's just one of those things. So, Midway was functionally liquidated at this point, folded into, much like we discussed before with parts of Atari, the Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment division. But that's not really the end of the story. You see, one of Midway Games' big franchises after the 80s and their restructuring was a little thing called Mortal Kombat. And Mortal Kombat was still seen by Warner's as a highly viable license. So, what Warner did is, shortly after purchasing Midway, they shut down all of the Midway branch studios except the one in Chicago. Restructured their entire interactive entertainment division and did a lot of getting rid of some people, bringing in some other people. Took a long time. Mortal Kombat founder, I believe it was, make sure I get the right gentleman here. Ed Boon. Okay, yeah. I know that took me a second. The basics of it is that Ed Boon was a co-creator of Mortal Kombat, but his partner did not necessarily stay with Midway Games throughout all this. A gentleman by the name of John Tobias, who, you know, yeah, here we go. Tobias, along with several other Midway staff members, left Midway in 1999 and formed Studio Gigante in 2000. And as such, he is kind of like, he's not 100% erased from Mortal Kombat history, but his contributions as a co-creator have been drastically downplayed, especially in the post-Warner buyout era. So, yeah, as I was saying, that the Chicago branch of Midway Games was put under the direct helm of Ed Boon and renamed NetherRealm Studios, and all they have really done since is develop Mortal Kombat and its similar pseudo spin-off franchise, Injustice Gods Among Us. And I say pseudo-related spin-off franchise because they Injustice Gods Among Us is a DC fighting game series. There's like 2 games in the series so far, but before they did Injustice, they did a Mortal Kombat versus DC crossover. So that's why I kind of call it a spin-off, because they like tested the waters of using DC characters in a fighting game series. And if you've ever played Mortal Kombat and then you play Injustice, it's like it's clearly the same programmers using the same engine. And I'm not throwing any shade at Injustice. I played the first game. It was very enjoyable, but that's what I'm saying, is it's clear if you've ever played Mortal Kombat and you play Injustice, even if you don't pay attention to the opening credits, you're going to sit there minutes into it and go, dude, this is basically Mortal Kombat with DC characters. It's like, well, yeah, because it's made by the same people. Oh, well, that would explain it. That would explain the sense of deja vu. But it's okay. That's why you get studios to work on different games, because folks like the way Mortal Kombat handles. So that's basically it. The idea of Midway Games as a brand doesn't really exist anymore. The assets and intellectual properties are not used by the modern NetherRealm Studios, which is the closest thing we have to the direct line of descent from Midway Games. Those assets are generally handled by other divisions within the Warner Interactive Entertainment Division, the IED. So it's all good. And, you know, it's kind of sad because I grew up with Midway. I knew about Midway Games. You know, it was somebody that, as we were discussing, had been there since almost the beginning of video games. They broke into it in the early 70s. They were making games before that, so it was a natural evolution of what the company had been doing with the amusement games. And then they made bad business decisions. Their games did not make the profit that they needed to over, you know, a decade or so. And now the concept of Midway Games no longer exists. But the intellectual properties remain. So, real quick, let's go ahead and run down some of those properties and see how many of them you recognize. I'm not going to list every single one, just the ones that I'm familiar with. We have Area 51, which is a light gun arcade game. We have Blitz, the League, which is an American football game, as an extension of their NFL Blitz series. They also had NHL Hits, NBA Showtime, NBA Maximum Hang Time, NBA Hang Time, and the iconic NBA Jam, along with NBA Jam Tournament Edition, which was similar to like the Street Fighter 2 Turbo, where it's not a full sequel, it's like an expanded version of the existing game, which is all good. They, as I said, did the Mortal Kombat franchise. They did WWF WrestleMania, the arcade game, Terminator 2 Judgment Day games, the more modern Gauntlet games, which is Gauntlet Legends and Gauntlet Dark Legacy, Galaga, Galaxian, Hydro Thunder, Joust, and its sequel Joust 2, Smash TV, Tapper, which is a classic retro arcade game. A lot of fun if you want to play it. Rampage and its sequel Rampage World Tour, Primal Rage, which is another fighting game. Let's see. Oh yeah, Ready to Rumble Boxing and its sequel, Ready to Rumble Boxing Round 2. Through purchasing of Data East, they own the rights to Burger Time. And I mean that's just the promo. Part of it is I'm trying to like kind of bounce back and forth. I don't want to give them too much credit for stuff that like they got from Atari and what Williams Manufacturing did itself, but it's kind of hard to pick through because you're looking at a list of stuff that's attributed to Midway Games when they got bought out, and it's like, well, they didn't actually make this one. So, games that were developed or licensed by Midway include the Nintendo 64 port of Doom, the Aqua Teen Hunger Force Zombie Ninja Pro-Am game, which is a hybrid kart racing fighting golf game. Just really crazy game. You have Jackie Chan's Stuntmaster, which is a beat-em-up platform video game developed by Radical Entertainment, published by Midway Home Entertainment for the PlayStation. LA Rush, which is a great arcade racing game series. The later Mortal Kombat games, which, you know, as I said, were eventually, they got spun off to the other studios, and it's, I don't know, it's kind of weird to say that they published it but they didn't develop it. It's like, well, it started at Midway, but then technically the development was done by the independent studio and just published under the Midway name before that was liquidated. But, they did the TNA Impact wrestling game. Like one that TNA did that did not do well, and pretty much guaranteed you're never going to see another TNA Impact game again. It's like, it's really funny. People sit there and look at like the announcement about multiple AEW video games being developed, and they're like, oh yeah, they're going to break the market, they're going to be a rival to WWE. Only if the games are good. If those games bomb, it's going to be like the TNA Impact game and just kind of disappear into trivia. So, oh yeah, they did Freaky Flyers, which was done by Midway's San Diego branch, which was a fun game. Really interesting dynamics. It was a racing game, but as you would figure, it was used planes instead of like cars or go-karts or whatever. So, but just, yeah, a lot of games that they developed and licensed. A lot of stuff for Nickelodeon. Ed, Edd n Eddy, Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. The Cruisin' series, which is a personal favorite of mine. Cruisin' USA is a great racing game. A lot of fun. So, you know, the Midway legacy does need to live on, even if the name is not actively being used in the present day. But just real quick, we're going to go ahead and throw out our related buddy WMS Industries, because I'm probably not going to do a full video on them. They were eventually acquired by Scientific Games, along with Bali, which had kind of gotten mixed in with the merger with Midway, and Shufflemaster, aka SHFL Entertainment Inc., which is a manufacturer of shuffling machines, table games, slot machines, you know, the kind of stuff you're going to see in casinos. So, you know, good times. So, Williams Manufacturing is no longer with us as well. But, you know, they did some good stuff. As I said, they did Defender, Joust, Robotron 2084, Sinistar. Oh, they were involved with Dragon's Lair, I think. Was that? No. That was Advanced Microcomputer Systems. They did do Star Rider. That was it. Star Rider, which was another Laserdisc-based arcade game. That did horrible. It was nowhere near as popular as Dragon's Lair. I do need to talk about Dragon's Lair one day. But Williams did a lot of pinball games. Like, that was Williams' bread and butter, was pinball games and the electronic slot machines. So, you know, it's a good time. There's a lot of great Williams pinball games. We may get into those if I do a full video on pinball and the history of it and how it's kind of continued to maintain a core audience over the years. But, you know, wrapping up, seeing this along with last month's video on Atari, this is the message, is that, you know, especially if you're focusing on the software development side, it's not always a cut and dry example of, hey, we made a great game, we're in business, we made a couple bad games, we're out of business, we're gone forever. The, you know, acquisitions, mergers, you know, ownership of intellectual property, who owns the companies that own your IP, it can get very complicated and convoluted. But at the end of the day, the important part is, if you're a great programmer with good idea for games, that you can keep yourself in business. You can keep yourself producing content. The name of your studio may change. The name of your company may change. You may have to move to different parts of the country. But no matter what, if you make good games, you will survive the liquidation of the company you made them for. And your games and their licenses will get picked up and will be continued by somebody somewhere. Death is not the end. So, probably not going to do too many video game histories from here on out. As I said, I may do pinball another month or so. But that one I got to do a lot more research on, because pinball, and start tracing all the companies that did pinball machines, I can get that. That's something I got to dig deeper into before I start discussing with you. But that means if you want to make sure you catch that episode, you got to hit that subscribe button. If you've already hit the subscribe button, hey, I thank you for doing that previously. If you enjoy these kind of videos, hit the like. Throw a comment out there. That's how I get feedback on this stuff. If you guys don't tell me what you like best, I'm just going to keep doing whatever comes in my brain. If you want more content like this, more history of video game companies, and the business side of them, let me know. But that's going to be it for this Friday. I'm going to see you back in 7. We got one more episode for January. One more episode to get everybody warmed up and recharged for the new year. So, everybody come on back. We're going to launch ourselves out of January and into the rest of the year with a bang. Later, taters.